Imagine pressing pause on food not for a meal, not for a day, but for 3 full days. No calories, no sugar, no protein, just water, minerals, and time. For most people, that idea triggers immediate fear. Hunger is often framed as danger, deprivation, or self-punishment. But biologically, hunger is none of those things. Hunger is a signal, and when that signal persists long enough, the human body does something extraordinary. It stops waiting for food and starts transforming itself. Fasting for 72 hours is not about willpower or discipline. It is about physiology. The body you live in today was shaped by tens of thousands of years of food uncertainty. Periods of scarcity were not an exception, they were the norm. As a result, your metabolism is not designed to fail without constant eating. It is designed to adapt, conserve, repair, and survive. And when food disappears long enough, an ancient biological program quietly switches on. The moment you stop eating, your body does not panic. For the first several hours, nothing dramatic happens at all. Your cells continue to run on glucose, the same fuel they use every day, drawn from glycogen stored in the liver and muscles. This phase feels deceptively normal. You may feel slightly hungry, slightly distracted, but functionally fine. This is why many people underestimate fasting. They assume the body will collapse quickly. It doesn't. But beneath that surface calm, signals are already changing. Insulin levels begin to fall. This matters more than most people realize. Insulin is not just a blood sugar hormone, it is a storage hormone. When insulin drops, the body receives a very different message. Stop storing energy and start accessing it. That single hormonal shift sets the stage for everything that follows. As the hours pass, glycogen stores begin to drain. The liver releases glucose into the bloodstream carefully, maintaining stability. But this supply is finite. Somewhere between 18 and 24 hours, most people reach a metabolic crossroads. The stored sugar is gone. At that point, the body has only two options: shut down or switch fuel sources. Evolution made sure it would choose the second. This is when fat metabolism begins to take center stage. Stored triglycerides are broken down into fatty acids, and the liver converts a portion of those fats into ketones. Ketones are not a backup fuel. They are a high-efficiency fuel, especially for the brain. In fact, ketones were essential to human survival long before agriculture existed. Around the 24-hour mark, many people experience discomfort, headaches, fatigue, irritability. This is often misinterpreted as danger. In reality, it is transition. The brain, accustomed to frequent glucose delivery, is being asked to switch operating systems. And like any system upgrade, there is temporary friction. But once ketone production increases, something unexpected happens. Mental clarity improves, focus sharpens. The constant mental noise associated with fluctuating blood sugar begins to quiet down. Research shows that ketones produce more energy per unit of oxygen than glucose and generate fewer inflammatory byproducts. The brain is no longer riding a metabolic roller coaster. It is running on steady power. By the second day, the body fully commits to this new state. Glycogen is gone. Insulin remains low. Fat breakdown accelerates. Ketone levels rise steadily. And inside your cells, a critical process activates: autophagy. Autophagy is not a detox trend. It is a fundamental cellular recycling system. When nutrients are scarce, cells begin breaking down damaged proteins, dysfunctional mitochondria, and metabolic debris. These components are not discarded, they are repurposed. This internal cleanup improves efficiency, resilience, and long-term cellular health. It is one of the primary reasons fasting is linked to longevity in animal models. As autophagy ramps up, something counterintuitive occurs. Hunger often fades. This is not because the body has given up. It is because it has adapted. Energy levels stabilize. Inflammation decreases. Resources are redirected away from digestion and toward repair. The body is no longer asking for food. It is too busy restoring itself. By 48 hours, most individuals are in full ketosis. Fat has become the dominant fuel. Blood sugar remains stable without dietary input. Growth hormone levels rise significantly, helping preserve lean tissue while supporting regeneration. Insulin stays suppressed, allowing fat to be mobilized efficiently. This hormonal environment is not accidental. It reflects a state the human body has entered countless times throughout evolutionary history. What many people describe at this stage is a strange calm, both physical and mental. Emotions feel less reactive, thoughts feel more organized. This is not psychological imagination. Ketones reduce oxidative stress in the brain and increase the production of BDNF, a protein involved in neuron growth and resilience. In practical terms, the brain becomes more adaptable under stress, not less. Approaching the 72-hour mark, the body enters what could be described as metabolic mastery. Energy production becomes highly efficient. Inflammatory markers decline. The immune system begins reorganizing itself, clearing out old or damaged immune cells through autophagy. Research from the University of Southern California suggests that prolonged fasting can stimulate stem cell-based regeneration of immune cells upon refeeding. This is not starvation. Starvation is a failure state. What happens here is controlled adaptation. The body is not breaking down indiscriminately. It is prioritizing survival, efficiency, and repair. Systems that are overworked during constant feeding, like the digestive tract, finally rest. The liver clears accumulated waste. The gut lining begins to repair. Even the microbiome shifts in response to the changed environment. By the time 72 hours arrive, the transformation is no longer subtle. Hunger is muted, energy is stable, mental clarity is pronounced. And biologically, the body has shifted from a mode of consumption to a mode of restoration. What happens next, how you reintroduce food, will determine how much of this benefit is retained. But the fundamental lesson is already clear. The human body is not fragile. It is responsive. And when given space, it does not deteriorate. It reorganizes. At this point, it's critical to make a clear distinction, because this is where most discussions about prolonged fasting go wrong. What your body is experiencing during a controlled 72-hour fast is not starvation. Starvation is what happens when the body has no energy reserves left and begins breaking down essential tissues indiscriminately. Fasting, on the other hand, is a regulated biological state that occurs precisely because energy reserves still exist. The body knows the difference, even if public conversation often doesn't. During starvation, insulin may be low, but so is energy availability. Muscle loss accelerates. Hormonal systems destabilize. In contrast, during a well-supported fast, insulin is low while fat availability is high. Growth hormone rises, protecting lean mass. Ketones supply the brain. This is not collapse. It is strategic conservation. By the third day of fasting, this strategy becomes unmistakable. The body is no longer reacting, it is operating. Energy output stabilizes. Blood glucose remains steady without food. Fat oxidation becomes dominant and predictable. This is why many people report that the third day feels easier than the second. The system has finished adapting. One of the most profound changes at this stage occurs within the immune system. Under normal eating conditions, immune cells are constantly produced, activated, and exhausted. This rapid turnover is useful in the short term, but inefficient over time. During prolonged fasting, immune activity temporarily slows. Old, damaged, or dysfunctional immune cells are identified and recycled through autophagy. This is not immune suppression, it is immune refinement. Research from the University of Southern California has shown that fasting periods of approximately 72 hours can trigger stem cell-based regeneration of white blood cells once refeeding begins. In simple terms, fasting clears out inefficient immune cells, and refeeding replaces them with new ones. This process has been studied in the context of chemotherapy tolerance, autoimmune modulation, and systemic inflammation. While fasting is not a medical treatment, it reveals something important. The immune system is not static. It can be rebuilt. At the same time, systemic inflammation continues to fall. Many inflammatory markers are directly tied to insulin signaling and constant nutrient intake. When insulin remains low for extended periods, inflammatory cascades quiet down. This has downstream effects on joint pain, vascular health, and even mood regulation. Chronic inflammation is metabolically expensive. Fasting gives the body permission to shut it down. The brain, meanwhile, enters one of its most metabolically efficient states. By day 3, ketones supply a significant portion of cerebral energy demands. Unlike glucose, ketones provide a steady fuel source without rapid fluctuations. They also act as signaling molecules, reducing oxidative stress and increasing the expression of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF plays a key role in neuroplasticity, learning, memory, and emotional regulation. Higher BDNF levels are associated with improved resilience under stress. This is one reason many people report emotional steadiness during extended fasting. The brain is not deprived. It is optimized for endurance and focus. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes sense. During periods of food scarcity, heightened cognition would have increased survival odds. A brain clouded by hunger would have been a liability. Instead, human biology evolved to sharpen perception when food was absent. Fasting activates that ancient logic. Another system undergoing quiet recalibration is the digestive tract. Under constant eating, the gut rarely rests. Digestive enzymes, bile, and intestinal motility are perpetually engaged. During a prolonged fast, this system finally pauses. The gut lining, which renews rapidly under normal conditions, gains time to repair microdamage. Tight junctions between intestinal cells strengthen. This may help explain why some people experience improvements in digestive symptoms after fasting. The liver also benefits significantly. As the central detoxification organ, the liver processes not only nutrients, but also environmental toxins, hormones, and metabolic waste. Continuous feeding keeps the liver in a state of constant triage. Fasting shifts its workload. Glycogen handling disappears. Fat oxidation becomes primary. Autophagy increases within liver cells, improving metabolic efficiency and resilience. Even the microbiome begins to change. While gut bacteria depend on dietary input, they also respond dynamically to fasting states. Some bacterial populations decline temporarily, while others adapt. Emerging research suggests that fasting may promote microbial diversity upon refeeding, which is associated with improved metabolic and mental health. This area of science is still developing, but the signal is clear. The gut ecosystem is not damaged by fasting, it is reshaped. By the end of 72 hours, the body has transitioned from a consumption-driven state to a repair-driven state. Energy is no longer reactive, hormones are coordinated, inflammation is suppressed, cellular maintenance is prioritized. This is why it is inaccurate to describe fasting as doing nothing. Biologically, it is an active process, one of the most active the body can perform. However, this is also where responsibility becomes critical. The benefits of fasting are not locked in automatically. What happens next matters. Refeeding is not a return to normal eating, it is a continuation of the process. After a prolonged fast, insulin sensitivity is high. Cells are primed to absorb nutrients efficiently. A sudden influx of highly processed food can overwhelm this system, undoing much of the metabolic clarity achieved. The most effective refeeding strategy is gradual and intentional. Easily digestible, nutrient-dense foods such as bone broth, cooked vegetables, healthy fats, and moderate protein signal the body to rebuild without shock. This controlled reintroduction allows stem cell activity, autophagy resolution, and metabolic signaling to integrate rather than conflict. Importantly, none of this suggests that 72-hour fasting is necessary or appropriate for everyone. The lesson is not duration. The lesson is capacity. The human body possesses a remarkable ability to adapt when given space. Even shorter fasting periods activate many of the same pathways just to a lesser degree. Understanding this reframes hunger entirely. Hunger is not an emergency. It is a transition signal. When respected rather than feared, it reveals how resilient human biology truly is. By now, one truth should be clear. The fast itself is only half of the biological story. What determines whether the body integrates the benefits or discards them is what happens after. Refeeding is not a return to normal eating. It is a metabolic transition just as significant as the fast that preceded it. After 72 hours without calories, insulin sensitivity is elevated across tissues. Muscle cells, liver cells, and even neurons are primed to absorb nutrients efficiently. This heightened sensitivity is not permanent. It is a temporary window, and how you respond to it matters. One of the most common mistakes people make after prolonged fasting is assuming that hunger has reset and indulgence is now harmless. Biologically, the opposite is true. The digestive system has been resting. Enzyme production has slowed. Gut motility has recalibrated. Flooding this environment with highly processed carbohydrates, excessive sugar, or large quantities of food overwhelms the system. This doesn't just cause discomfort, it disrupts the very signaling that fasting improved. Effective refeeding follows a simple principle: signal repair, not excess. The first foods should be easy to digest, nutrient-dense, and metabolically quiet. Bone broth, lightly cooked vegetables, healthy fats, and moderate protein provide amino acids, minerals, and lipids without forcing large insulin spikes. These foods communicate safety and rebuilding, not storage. This initial refeeding phase also appears to amplify the regenerative processes initiated during fasting. Stem cell activity, particularly within the immune system and gut lining, responds to nutrient availability. When nutrients arrive gradually, they are directed toward repair. When they arrive suddenly and in excess, they are diverted towards storage. The difference is not willpower, it is physiology. Another underappreciated aspect of refeeding is psychological. After prolonged fasting, taste perception often sharpens. Sweetness becomes more intense. Texture becomes more noticeable. This sensory reset can be used constructively or ignored. Eating slowly, deliberately, and without distraction allows the nervous system to recalibrate its relationship with food. Rushing through this phase reactivates old patterns without awareness. However, it is essential to be explicit about limitations. Extended fasting is not appropriate for everyone. Individuals with a history of eating disorders, those who are underweight, pregnant, or breastfeeding women, and people with certain medical conditions should not attempt prolonged fasting without medical supervision. This is not a disclaimer for liability, it is a recognition of biological diversity. Fasting is a stressor. In healthy systems, it is a hormetic stress, one that strengthens adaptation. In vulnerable systems, the same stress can destabilize. Context determines outcome. This is why responsible discussion of fasting focuses on mechanisms, not mandates. Importantly, many of the benefits discussed in this video do not require 72 hours. Autophagy, insulin reduction, ketone production, and inflammatory suppression begin much earlier. Shorter fasting windows, 24 hours, intermittent fasting protocols, or even time-restricted eating activate similar pathways at lower intensity. Duration increases depth, not category. This perspective matters because it reframes fasting as a tool, not a test. The goal is not endurance. The goal is metabolic flexibility, the ability to switch fuel sources efficiently and recover balance when conditions change. A body that can fast briefly without distress is a body that is resilient, not deprived. Another misconception worth addressing is the idea that fasting fixes everything. It does not. Fasting reveals capacity, but it does not replace nutrition, movement, sleep, or long-term lifestyle patterns. What it offers is a reset signal, a period during which the body reprioritizes maintenance over accumulation. From a neurological standpoint, this reset can be profound. Many people report a shift in how they experience hunger after fasting, not as an emergency, but as information. This distinction is critical. When hunger is interpreted as danger, it drives impulsive behavior. When hunger is interpreted as a signal, it allows choice. This change is not psychological suggestion. It is rooted in stabilized blood glucose, reduced insulin volatility, and altered gut-brain signaling. Ghrelin and leptin, the hormones associated with hunger and satiety, become more predictable when eating patterns are less chaotic. Fasting simplifies the signal environment. The broader implication of all this extends beyond food. Modern life rarely allows biological systems to rest. Constant stimulation, constant consumption, constant decision-making keep the body in a reactive state. Fasting is one of the few interventions that creates enforced stillness at the metabolic level. And in that stillness, systems reorganize. What emerges after a properly executed fast is not weakness, but clarity. Not deprivation, but efficiency. The body demonstrates that it does not need constant input to function well. It needs appropriate input at the right time. This is why framing fasting as punishment misses the point entirely. The body does not interpret fasting as self-harm. It interprets it as a familiar signal, one it has responded to for millennia. The harm comes not from the absence of food, but from chronic excess, erratic intake, and metabolic confusion. As this series moves toward its conclusion, the most important takeaway is not whether someone should fast for 72 hours. It is this: the human body contains self-correcting mechanisms that modern habits often suppress. When those mechanisms are given space even briefly, they activate with precision. Understanding this changes the conversation. Health becomes less about constant control and more about strategic release, less about forcing outcomes and more about creating conditions. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson of fasting. Not that you can go without food, but that your body knows what to do when you step out of the way. At this point, the most important question is no longer what happens during a 72-hour fast. It is what that experience reveals about the human body itself. Because the deeper lesson here is not about endurance, discipline, or pushing limits. It is about responsiveness. Modern culture often treats the body as fragile, something that must be constantly managed, constantly fed, constantly corrected. Hunger is framed as failure. Discomfort is framed as danger. But biology tells a different story. When food disappears temporarily, the body does not unravel. It reorganizes. It shifts priorities. It reallocates energy. And it does so with remarkable precision. This does not mean that fasting is a cure-all. It does not mean that longer is better. And it certainly does not mean that deprivation equals health. What it means is that the human body contains adaptive systems that only become visible when constant intake stops interfering with them. One of the most valuable outcomes of understanding fasting physiology is that it dismantles fear. Fear of hunger, fear of missing meals, fear that the body will immediately decline without constant input. These fears are understandable, but they are not biologically accurate. Short-term absence of food in a healthy and supported system does not equal harm. It equals signaling. And signaling is the language biology understands best. When insulin falls, the message is not panic. It is switch modes. When ketones rise, the message is not starvation. It is optimize. When autophagy activates, the message is not break down. It is clean up and rebuild. These processes are not random. They are coordinated responses shaped by evolution. This is why fasting, when discussed responsibly, is not about restriction. It is about contrast. It creates a clear boundary between feeding and non-feeding states, allowing the body to express metabolic flexibility, the ability to move smoothly between energy sources and functions. That flexibility is one of the strongest predictors of long-term metabolic health. In practical terms, this understanding changes how we relate to everyday eating. Meals stop being emergency interventions. Snacks stop being constant background noise. Hunger becomes informative rather than threatening. And food regains its proper role, not as emotional regulation, but as nourishment. This perspective is especially important in a world where constant availability has blurred biological signals. When food is always present, the body never receives a clear message to repair. When insulin is always elevated, fat cannot be accessed efficiently. When digestion never pauses, maintenance is delayed. Fasting, whether brief or extended, interrupts that cycle. But interruption does not require extremes. Most of the physiological benefits discussed in this video begin well before 72 hours. Even modest fasting windows can reduce insulin, increase fat oxidation, and initiate cellular cleanup. The difference is one of degree, not kind. This is why the most responsible takeaway is not try a 72-hour fast. It is understand what your body is capable of. For some people, that understanding may inform occasional extended fasting. For others, it may simply remove anxiety around missing a meal. Both outcomes are valid. It is also essential to reiterate boundaries. Fasting is not appropriate for everyone. Health is contextual. Bodies differ. Histories differ. What strengthens one system may strain another. Respecting those differences is not weakness, it is scientific honesty. The goal of this channel has never been to prescribe rigid protocols. It is to explain mechanisms, to translate complex physiology into real-life understanding. When people understand how their bodies work, they make better decisions not because they are told to, but because clarity replaces confusion. And clarity is powerful. If this video shifted how you think about hunger, energy, or fasting, then it has already done its job. You do not need to fast for days to benefit from that insight. You only need to stop interpreting every signal as a threat, because the human body is not a machine that breaks when it pauses. It is a system that repairs when it rests. As you move forward, the most important practice is not longer fasting. It is awareness. Awareness of signals. Awareness of patterns. Awareness of how often we eat out of habit rather than need. Small changes, informed by biology, compound over time. And that is where real transformation happens, not through extremes, but through alignment. If you want to explore this topic further, there are many directions to go. Shorter fasting windows, circadian timing, walking and fat oxidation, how sleep interacts with insulin, how stress alters metabolic signals. The body is not a collection of isolated systems. It is an integrated whole. That is what we explore here. If you found this breakdown valuable, consider subscribing to the channel. Each video is designed to bridge rigorous science with practical understanding without hype, without fear, and without oversimplification. Share this video with someone who has been taught to fear, hunger, or distrust their body. Sometimes the most powerful intervention is simply restoring trust in biology. And remember, health is not about constant doing. Sometimes, it is about allowing the body to do what it has always known how to do.